How do you build a wall? Well, when Will Smith was a boy, he learned the hard way. His father's wall was crumbling, and back then he was a contractor, so he wasn't going to hire anybody to fix it. Instead, he put Will and his brother Harry to work. The summer went slowly, the wall was 20 foot long, it seemed endless, and they thought they'd never get it done. His father marched over there and told them, forget the wall, there is no wall. All you have to do is think about the brick in your hand. You add the cement, you lay it down perfectly, and then you take another brick and do the exact same. Building a wall and building a life are surprisingly similar. Hi, my name is Jay, and I'd like to welcome you to the blink of Will Smith's memoir, fittingly enough called Will. So, Oprah called it the best memoir she'd read in her entire life. Now, obviously I won't be able to tell you everything about Will's entire life, we just don't have the time. Instead, I'm going to walk you through 7 defining moments of his life. By the end, you may not have the full, detailed picture, but you'll have a little mosaic of moments. So, let's begin the journey. And it all starts, as you may have guessed, in West Philadelphia. It's 1985, we're in Philly, or more specifically, the leafy middle-class neighborhood of Winfield. Will's just returning home from school, 17 years old, and as he enters the house, he senses something's wrong. Sure enough, his mom's at the kitchen table with a look somewhere between sadness and anger on her face. That's unusual. With his father, trouble's never been far away. Honestly, there's no pleasing the man. He's a hard-drinking disciplinarian with a mean streak. He's always been moody and unpredictable. But Mom is different. They've never not been on the same page, until now. Will's no scholar, but he's done well in school so far, well enough to be able to get into a good college, and that means everything to his mother. But what you don't know about Mom is that she came up in a poor family in a bad neighborhood during hard times. College saved her. It's what put her in this comfortable brick house in this leafy middle-class neighborhood of Winfield. And times have changed, sure, but the world's still a brutal place, especially for a young black man like her son. He has to go to college. That's the truth. But Will's grades have started to slip, and that, he assumes, explains the look on her face. A while back, Will's cousin introduced him to hip-hop. And he's been rapping ever since, or hippity-hopping around, as his mom says. Right now, he's teamed up with a disc jockey named Jeff Towns. They call themselves Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, and they've been making waves. First in Philly, then in New York. Now, hip-hop's still new, but everyone in the scene knows it's the next big thing, and they're riding the wave. But hip-hop, Mom says, isn't a career. It's a hobby. He can rap. He just can't be a rapper. That's when Will says it. The thing that's going to break her heart. He doesn't want to go to college. It's a stalemate. Neither mom nor son backs down. Enter Daddy-O. For Mom, it's education that matters. For her husband, it's hard work. They're different like that. She chooses words with care, speaking with academic finesse. Daddy-O, though, is a poet of profanity. Will remembers one time he called a man, and excuse his French, a dirty rat, cocksucking, low-down, mangy pig-fucker. On hip-hop, though, they see eye to eye. College is a safer bet than the music career. But there's an artist underneath that hard exterior of Daddy-O. Thing is, the cussing old soldier didn't dream of owning the ice packing business that puts food on the Smith's table. He wanted to be a photographer. But his parents made him sell his camera. Art, they said, just wasn't practical. So Daddy-O agrees. Will can pursue his music career with one condition. If Will doesn't succeed in a year, he's going to college. Hip-hop has its roots in New York street parties. Disc jockeys, DJs, played records looping the most danceable parts of popular tracks. Eventually, DJs started to use 2 turntables so they could keep the beats going even longer. Since they were busy managing 2 records playing at the same time, they couldn't interact with the crowd. This is where the master of ceremonies, the MC, comes in. They talk to the audience, bragging about the DJ, keeping the crowd hype. The most creative MCs started talking rhymes that matched the rhythm of the DJ's beats. Jamaican immigrants called that rapping. And that's how hip-hop was born. In the 80s, hip-hop was still new and underground. As folks said back then, it was fresh. That's what Will's stage name meant. It was a boast. He was fresh because he was at the tip of the spear of this revolutionary new music. He was the prince, because he was the best at what he did, rapping. Boasting was all the rage in early hip-hop. Crowds would gather to listen to two rappers trading bars over beats. Usually they play up their toughness, acting gangster, bragging about money and women. Will was different. In high school, there were plenty of guys who had a better voice. Some were just better poets. But no one could make a crowd laugh like him. He had an eye for comic detail. If he saw someone's pants sitting a little bit too high above their shoes, he'd use it. Look at you pretending you're all fly. Looks like your shoes went to a party and your pants got high. It doesn't matter how tough the other guy's acting. If the crowd laughs at that line, it's game over. If you're funny, you're untouchable. Will made it look easy, but the truth was, the Fresh Prince had been molded by the unrelenting work ethic of his father. While the other kids with talent were cutting class and smoking weed, he filled notebook after notebook with rhymes, practicing his verses and his punchlines in front of a mirror. You don't have to be a gangster when you're relentless. Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince's debut single, Girls Ain't Nothing But Trouble, was released in 1986. The album that followed in 87, Rock the House, sold more than 500,000 copies. Remember, hip-hop is still underground at this point. That was just the start. He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper, the follow-up album, was released in 1988. It sold more than 3 million copies and won the duo a Grammy. Will had barely hit his 20s and he had it all. Fame, wealth, adoration. He was invincible. Or so he thought. He felt numb, empty, directionless. There was no script. So he picked up a poker from the fireplace, went to his front door, and smashed every glass panel. Will had just learned that his childhood sweetheart had cheated on him. Fame, money, the new house he'd bought for them, none of it meant anything without Melanie Parker. They'd been together since they were 16. Will's idea of himself was bound up with Melanie's opinion. It hung on her approval. If she cheated on him, it was because of his own deficiencies. If he'd been a better man, she wouldn't have done it. That idea brought him a one-way ticket to misery. That was 1988 and the start of the Fresh Prince's downfall. He tried to fill the emptiness. He bought another house, 3 luxury cars to park in the driveway. His dad was not impressed. We've all got one ass, he says. What's anyone need 3 cars for? But there were people in Philly whom it did impress. Will started partying with gangsters. They gambled on everything, including those flashy cars. He bought a motorbike, crashed it. He slept with dozens of women, but it only made him feel worse. He also developed a mean streak, just like his dad. And wherever he went, he got into fights. When you don't have money, sex, success, those things start looking like answers. If you had them, you tell yourself, you'd feel great. But you can be rich, famous, successful, and still feel miserable. And that's when the terrifying thought kicks in. Maybe the problem is you. Will dismissed that thought. No, he needed more money, more women, more Grammys. But things were falling apart just as quickly as they came together. Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince's next record, And in This Corner, was released in 89. They spent $300,000 hiring a record studio in Jamaica, but they barely stepped foot in it. There was just too much rum punch to be drunk in the Caribbean sun. The partying took its toll. Will was not putting in the hours, and it showed. The record was a flop. And then Uncle Sam came knocking. Will hadn't paid a cent of income tax. The IRS took everything, the money, the house, the cars. He was broke. Worse, the FBI was closing in on his gangster friends. There was nothing to keep him in Philly. In 1989, he decided to get out. He borrowed enough money for a deposit on an apartment and a plane ticket. Destination: Los Angeles. Benny Medina is the real-life Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He wasn't born and raised in West Philadelphia, but in Watts, Los Angeles. After his mother's death, he ended up living with a wealthy white family in Bel-Air. He went to showbiz and became one of LA's best-known TV producers. When Will met him in 1989, Benny was working on a script based on his own life story. He just needed a lead. And so he asked Will a life-changing question. Can you act? Technically, the answer was no. He never had any formal training or been cast in any role, but performing in front of an audience, eliciting passions, playing the role people want you to play rather than who you actually are, sure, Will could act. He said yes. Benny figured he could and promised to be in touch. In Philly, being Hollywood is the definition of insincerity, and that's how Will thought Benny was. It was just one of those LA moments. He wrote it off and moved on. Fast forward a couple months, Benny calls. Quincy Jones, the producer of Michael Jackson's albums, is celebrating his birthday. It's a rare chance to meet this industry legend. When Will shakes his hand, Quincy gives him a look. The kind of look you give someone when you've heard a lot about them. You haven't made up your own mind yet. He's in a good mood, though. They hit it off. Then Will tells him he's from West Philadelphia. Quincy says, that's where Will's character is going to be from before he goes to Bel Air. You know, on the show Benny's been talking about. Quincy isn't messing around either. He claps his hands, the room cleared of furniture, creating an impromptu stage. Guests fall silent, and an audience forms. He presses a script into Will's hand. Everyone who needs to sign off on this is in the room, he says. And that doesn't happen often. It's now or never. He gives Will 10 minutes to prepare for the audition of his life. What happens next is a blurry collage of punchlines and laughs. The applause jolts Will back to consciousness. The room rises, there's an ovation, then there's Quincy shouting about analysis causing paralysis. He orders lawyers to draw up contracts and producers to sign them. Then he tells Will where to put his own name. By the end of the evening, the show was a done deal. That was March 14th, 1990. The writing, the auditions, the final casting was all done by the end of April. Shooting started mid-May, and on September 10th, 1990, the first episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air aired on NBC. Will had arrived in Hollywood. Will's manager handed him the phone. It was Steven Spielberg he wanted to meet. An hour later, Will was in a helicopter headed east out of New York City. He had just turned down a script titled Men in Black. Now he's flying out to an estate in the Hamptons to explain why a movie produced by the greatest director wasn't good enough for Will Smith. It was a very nervy ride. He had to tell Spielberg that he loved the idea, which is true, while also persuading him that the timing wasn't right, without burning his bridges. Will had just starred in his biggest role yet, U.S. Marine Captain Stephen Hiller, a man who overcomes adversity, saves the earth, gets the girl. It's hard to overstate the success of Independence Day, the second highest grossing film of all time back in 1996. But Independence Day was about aliens. So was Men in Black. It's easy to get pigeonholed to Hollywood. Will didn't want to become the alien guy. The helicopter touched down, and there was Spielberg, dressed in an old t-shirt and jeans, looking like he didn't know he was Spielberg, the legendary director of Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, Jaws, Schindler's List, E.T. They chatted over lemonade. He saw Will's point, Spielberg said, but he also thought he was looking at it all wrong. Men in Black wasn't really about aliens, it was about a hero's journey. It's one of the oldest narratives in the world, common to every culture that's ever told stories. A hero receives a call to adventure. Something happens in their world that forces them to undergo a dangerous journey of discovery. Accumulates in the supreme ordeal of a life or death struggle. If they're wise enough to overcome their traumas, they find the strength to prevail. Victorious, they return home with their hard-won wisdom, their treasure. That allows them to live a life worth living. So many great movies follow that arc. It doesn't matter if they're aliens or sharks or Nazis seeking the Holy Grail. What draws us in is that these stories penetrate. They move us. They make us laugh and cry and gasp. That, Spielberg concluded, was the thing to look for in a script. Steven Spielberg didn't just convince Will to take on the Men in Black role that day. He also unlocked the key to Will Smith's formula for cinematic success. Will's second son, Jaden, was born in 1998. He followed his father into movies at just 12 years old. He was starring in The Karate Kid alongside Jackie Chan. Will produced the movie, and he was a relentless taskmaster. Everything had to be just right, especially with his son's performances. Jaden's scenes were endlessly reshot, and just when it looked like the project was reaching its conclusion, Will extended filming in China by 3 months. So, father and son clashed. Will claimed to be acting in his son's interests, but Jaden saw it differently. Will had made his life hell because he was terrified of failure. That fear came from Daddy-O. As Will's dad said, a soldier succeeds when he's single-minded, when he sacrifices everything for the sake of the mission. 99% is as good as 0. Those were his truths, and they became Will's too. You focus on the mission, you block everything else out. You can worry about what those around you are thinking and feeling, or you can win. It's hard to live with a man like that. Will knew that better than most. But here he was, a father to his own children, repeating Daddy-O's mistakes. He saw his youngest son, Jaden, pulling away from him. In 2012, Will watched I Shouldn't Be Alive, a TV show featuring harrowing tales of near-death experiences. One of the stories is about a father and son who get lost in the wilderness. When the father's badly injured, the teenage son has to go on a dangerous journey by himself to find help. It was the perfect premise for a Will Smith movie. It was also an opportunity to repair Will and Jaden's relationship. Shortly after that, they started shooting After Earth. It tells the story of a father and son who crash land on Earth in the distant future after the planet had become uninhabitable. Jaden's character travels across the wasteland to save his father, played by Will. After Earth wasn't like The Karate Kid. This time, Will took a backseat. He was there to support Jaden, not push him. And Jaden noticed. One day, a coordinator asked Jaden to perform an action move he wasn't comfortable with. He stood his ground, but the coordinator would not take no for an answer. Will wasn't on set, but he saw what happened next on the monitor. Jaden said he didn't think the move was realistic. The coordinator insisted on getting a few takes anyways. Jaden then turned to the rest of the crew and asked someone to get his father. That was one of Will's proudest moments as a father. The movie flopped. It didn't matter. Shooting it was the real prize. Will wasn't the enemy anymore. He was someone Jaden trusted, someone he could turn to for help and support. One of the most important ideas in filmmaking is that it's easier to craft a compelling narrative when you start at the end. In other words, you've got to know your ending. It's like the punchline of a joke. If you know your conclusion, you also know what kind of details and clues to paint along the way. Everything serves a purpose. Everything leads somewhere. Life isn't a movie, which is probably what makes us love them in the first place. Cinema's neater. In reality, we don't know the ending until we get there, and then the audience laughs or boos. The audience's reaction plays a key role in the wisdom about death in many cultures. Tibetan Buddhist texts, for example, teach that a dying person must be shown unconditional love in their last moments. This releases them from all expectations, allowing them to pass more peacefully. For 5 months, Will dug into this wisdom. He was preparing for his role, Collateral Beauty, a 2016 film about a father coming to terms with his daughter's death. And that's when he learned that his father, Daddy-O, was dying. Daddy-O had already had a few brushes with death. For starters, he survived 2 heart attacks when Will was a kid. When he had a second attack, he knew it was coming when his left arm went limp, drove himself to the hospital only using his right arm. But this really was the end. Years of chain smoking, hard drinking, caught up with him. Doctors gave him 6 weeks. His relationship with his father had always been difficult, to say the least. He was beating his mom, verbally abusive. As a child, Will swore he'd get revenge against his father. In one of his darkest moments, he even contemplated pushing his father down a flight of stairs. But with his father's end so close, that sense of revenge left Will's mind. He wanted to make his passing easier, to look beyond his many faults, to give him a conclusion worthy of his achievements. One night he sat next to his father's bed and told him he'd done good with his life. His father wasn't expecting it. He kept his gaze on the TV set, took a drag from the cigarette. He'd led a good life, Will repeated. It's okay to let go when he was ready. Will was going to take care of everyone he loved. His father nodded, his eyes welling, his gaze still fixed on the TV screen. He passed 2 weeks later. So what is it that made Will Smith's life so special? The easy answer is, well, look at his career, the Grammys, the movies, the luxury cars he owned at the age of 20. Rags to riches at its best. We love this sort of story. It projects strength and relentlessness and a work-hard mentality. But that's not the full picture. As you can probably tell by now, Will Smith's life wasn't all peaches and cream. He had his fair share of pain, financial screw-ups, broken relationships, a dysfunctional family. But what made Will Smith the person he is today is how he dealt with it, head on. What's inspiring about his life is not the amount of money in his bank account, but his willingness to face his inner demons. I mean, he even wrote a book about it.